with the apparent reduction of certain crimes during the lockdown. Can we attribute that to the ban on alcohol sales? Could increased police and army visibility also be one of the reasons? To help me unpack this, I'm joined by senior researcher at the Institute for Security Studies, Andrew Faull. Andrew, thank you so much for talking to us this evening. Let's just answer the big question here. Did, the ban on alcohol sales and also increased police visibility during the lockdown, did it give us a sense that things have, decreased somewhat when it comes to crime?
Good evening, Bongiwe. I think this is a question which we can't answer definitively, but the trauma intake data and the murder data in particular suggest that something about lockdown has led to a significant decrease in crime. Some of that was very likely to do with the ban on alcohol and some likely to do with the ban on movement. There may have been other factors at play, but in that this wasn't a controlled experiment, it's difficult for us to be precise about them. Something which will be interesting to see is how crime and murder, and particularly violent interactions during this period of lockdown, might differ compared to the first period. So in the first period, we had a ban on alcohol and a ban on movement. Now we've got a ban on alcohol, but we don't have the same ban on movement. So that will allow us to disentangle the relationship between the two somewhat. So likewise with visible policing, we saw very harsh policing and enforcement in the first weeks of the lockdown. I think that harshness and what we saw as some abuse at times has declined. And we may be able to get some data on the degree to which police have been visible during this latter period. So I think with a bit more information, we would be able to disentangle the degree to which alcohol and movement have played a part in this crime decline.
And let's talk then about, some of those that were suggesting that possibly, I know that you're saying, those numbers are not definitive yet because the minister has said that we are going to be getting those numbers, in the next release of the crime stats. But let's look at also another factor that some people are saying that may have been at play here. What you also touched on, the movement, the restrictions, because some people are saying that may have also contributed to people not even being able to go out to the police station and also reporting these crimes.
Absolutely. Police reported crime is always an indication of the total level of crime in any society, but it isn't an absolute indication. And this applies anywhere in the world. Everywhere in the world, a percentage of those people who are assaulted will not turn to police. In South Africa, it is quite a large percentage of assault victims, but with something like murder, we have much higher reporting and discovery rates. So I think there would probably be significantly less reporting during lockdown, especially if police disincentivize people from reporting, as one of your commenters said earlier. But more common sensely, I think if people aren't interacting with each other, then the opportunity for crime significantly declines, and that is going to be a major factor at play here. So a big question is, have people interacted? I think in the first weeks, there may have been much less social interaction than there is now. I think there's probably a lot more lockdown fatigue. People aren't abiding by the stay-at-home orders as much as the state would like them to. And so there probably is a lot more social interaction, a lot more of the kinds of interactions that lead to violent crime, walking to taxi ranks in the morning for the many economic activities that are opening. And so the question is there crime happening in those moments, or is it simply that there is less crime because of something like the alcohol ban? And it will take more data and more reflection for us to disentangle these answers. I think, however, without doubt, we know that alcohol plays a significant role in South Africa's violent crime, but it isn't the sole determinant. So you can have a university campus where everybody is drinking extremely heavily, but there is very little violent crime, and you can have another area where very few people are drinking heavily, and there's a significant amount of violence amongst that smaller community. So it's not simply alcohol; it's an intersection of alcohol and all sorts of other factors.
And as you talk about all sorts of other factors as well, some people have been concerned that after the lockdown is lifted completely, we don't know when that is going to be just yet, there might be, an increase when it comes to the level of crimes. Do you share the school of thought?
Yes, I think there certainly will be a reversion to the way things were before, unless we intervene and we put measures in place to prevent that. And I think this has shown us that we really do need to do better in the regulation of alcohol, the enforcement of the existing regulations, and that we could save thousands of lives each year if we did so. So I'm hoping that government and partners will take that lesson from this, including the alcohol industry. So I don't think banning alcohol is the answer. We've seen crime decline across the world, and most countries didn't ban alcohol. So we know that alcohol isn't the main factor at play here. But we do know that in South Africa, a large proportion, probably a majority of trauma intake that is related to violence or accidents often has an element of alcohol at play. And so we do have a particular problem in South Africa, which we should be able to address through better regulation and enforcement.
And do you think that South Africa should also be looking at the number of detectives it has per police station?
I think every police service in the world would like more detectives, more visible police, but we don't have the budget in South Africa. We don't have the capacity. We need to do better with what we have. I think the South African Police Service can do better with the resources that they have. We can't expect the police to solve everything. We can't expect the police to act equally with every type of crime, but we need to identify the most important categories of crime, the most important areas in which the most harm is taking place. And we need to carefully and intentionally intervene in ways and monitor our impacts so that we can learn, revise, and get better. So I think we can do much more with the resources we have. The South African Police Service is fairly well resourced compared to many police organizations in the world. So it's about focus and the public accepting that we can't expect them to do everything, but we should expect them to do what they should do and be where they should be. And finally, of course, crime in South Africa isn't simply generated as a result of good or bad policing. We have a very structurally unjust society, and policing alone isn't going to fix that. We need to fix our schools. We need to make sure people aren't going to bed hungry. We need to give people jobs. We need to restore people's dignity. So policing is vital to allowing the space for broader healing, broader interventions, but we shouldn't expect the police to fix this on their own. That's just unrealistic.
And Andrew, just as a final question from me, this of course relates to the crime stats that we saw coming out from the police bosses last week. You would have seen that KZN is starting to become a province that, police are also now worried about, especially management when it comes to, you see Inanda, they're leading when it comes to murder and, in fact, to rape. And then you're also seeing that it's number 3 when it comes to murder, and Umlazi is number 4, and Umlazi is number 2 when it comes to rape. How then do they begin to address this problem? Because that province in itself is highly politicized and at the same time is quite complex in nature.
Yeah, as you say, it's very complex, and I don't want to claim to know the solutions for KZN. Ideally, policing everywhere would be professional. There wouldn't be political interference. We would allow police to, as I say, do what and be where they are most needed. And so if sexual offences are the offence causing the most harm and they are clustered in a particular area, police should be able to bring them down. However, I would add that, as with all crimes, these reported incidents are just an indication of a problem. We shouldn't accept that just because people are reporting it in one area means that that really is the number 1 hotspot in the country. It may be an indication that police and communities have a better relationship than other areas where there's just as much sexual violence, but people don't feel they are able to report it to police. So we can't just interpret things at face value. I also want to add that just because the total number of a particular crime goes up doesn't mean we are at greater risk. So the media has largely been reporting that murder has once again gone up in South Africa. But what we should be looking at is murder per population. And for the first time in 8 years, the murder rate has remained the same, 36 per 100,000. So that is very positive. That means effectively murder hasn't increased in the country this year on year. And I think we need to look at these figures more critically rather than panicking. But of course, we have a significant challenge. We need to do everything we can to address it. People are really suffering and living in fear. So, yeah, we should try to stay as calm as possible and do what we can in the best way that we can.
Thank you so much for your insights tonight. Certainly, I do hope that some of the viewers were able to take away, quite a lot from this discussion, especially when it comes to that murder rate, as you ended there on that note to say 36 per 100,000. That is, of course, those numbers that then not get picked up when it comes to the particular, stats in themselves, because a lot of these numbers go unnoticed. And thank you so much for putting us in the picture there. That's Senior Researcher at the Institute for Security Studies, Andrew Faull.